This episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is presented by our new football show, Sports Spectrum's Weekly Slant. It debuts every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and streams on our Facebook and YouTube channels, as well as our website, sportspectrum.com. And we've got a ton of feedback from you all who've been watching, and I understand how cool this is, really, for me to be a part of it, but also to know that this show is so unique in the fact that there isn't another football show out there that intersects with faith, that brings Jesus into the football conversation. And that's what we're trying to do here at Sports Spectrum, and certainly what we're trying to do with Sports Spectrum's Weekly Slant. So tune in every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, as we stream live on Facebook, on YouTube, and over at sportspectrum.com. And then certainly you can go back and watch all of the episodes or stream after it airs live at our website, sportspectrum.com. Please tune in. I'd love to hear what you think of it. Sports Spectrum's Weekly Slant.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Jason, and this is the Sports Spectrum podcast. We got a great guest today. Walker Zimmerman is joining us. He's with Nashville SC. He's one of the great defenders, really, in the MLS, and he is also a member of the United States national team and a two-time MLS Major League Soccer All-Star selection in 2019 and 2021. Last year, in 2020, he was the MLS Defender of the Year. And it goes way back to 2013 when he was a first-round selection in the MLS SuperDraft by FC Dallas. Then he went to Los Angeles for a couple years, and now he's with Nashville, one of my favorite cities in Nashville. He scored the first goal in Nashville SC history way back before the pandemic even started, February 29th, 2020. And like I said, widely regarded as one of the top defenders in the MLS. Walker is also the son of a pastor, and his faith is very important to him. And we kind of talk about what that faith looks like, how it was growing up, and now how he kind of interacts his faith with his job as a professional soccer player. He's also a husband and a dad. His baby Tucker makes a little bit of an appearance as well in today's conversation. Take a listen to Walker Zimmerman. I really like talking to Walker. He joins us today on Sports Spectrum. What's up, Walker? How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You're sitting right next to your little baby. I think we should paint the picture here for our audience as we record this in the fall here. You're home alone. And you got is it a newborn? It's a fairly small baby, so I'm guessing.
Yeah. We're like 12 weeks as of yesterday. So I'm on dad duty. Try to get him down. We got a little bit of squirming going on, but hopefully he falls back asleep here.
Well, if we got to take a pause for a second so you can go do the daddy thing, we will. But let's talk about your journey a little bit. I read you grew up a PK, a pastor's kid. Is that right?
Yeah, it was very formative. As I mentioned, I mean, a lot of people can kind of grow up in and around the church, but when you're a PK, you are literally in and around the church. So Sunday mornings were different for me. I was there for all the services that day. We'd stay after and play hide and seek with other employees' kids all over the church building, make paper airplanes out of the bulletins, throw them across, try and hit the back wall of the auditorium, just cause havoc, But it was great. I think, like I said, formative in the sense that from the very early age, I think I had a very strong understanding of not only, having morals and what it's like to love other people, but also it created a foundation for me spiritually, where I think my faith has played a huge role in kind of my development over the years, who I am as a person, as an athlete. So there were a lot of big pros. But I think, there's just so much responsibility that's put on you to be a moral person, to be, never being caught doing anything wrong. And so I think there's that extra pressure and responsibility that other kids might not kind of understand or have to deal with in the same way.
You felt that, I'm imagining, huh?
100%. And, that's why I think oftentimes you see PKs, the joke is that they go kind of one or two ways, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that is a consequence of the pressure of and responsibility of having to kind of be in the spotlight of, oh, well, you're a pastor's kid, so you have to be a certain way. Yeah, I think, luckily for me, it was something I embraced and like loved that role of just trying to be a good role model, a good friend, a good listener to my peers, and overall like a good example and good leader for them of, being true to who I am and true to what I believe, whether it was the same as them or different.
When does soccer come into play where you're all in on this, where you realize, I'm pretty good at this. I think I want to pursue this because, like I said, being, the son of a pastor, there's that push pull, I think, as a parent. This is just how it is for me with my daughter now, who's 17, and I'm not a pastor, but I am one of the leaders in our church. And I want to make sure that church and God and Jesus and the gospel are the most important thing in her life. But I want to let her pursue her interest in sports and other things. What was that like for you? Maybe, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah. So I grew up playing everything. Our neighborhood was super talented athletically. And so we grew up, playing basketball, cul-de-sac baseball, football, roller hockey, like you name it, foursquare, it was like any random game.
Yeah.
We had a very talented street of guys and girls who went on to play college sports. And so that immediately kind of, one, shaped the competitiveness in me, but two, just confirmed my love for sports, not just soccer. And so I would say going into 8th grade was when it all switched for me from wanting to be this professional athlete to probably specifically saying, I want to be a professional soccer player. And that kind of was a mixture of a few things, but I think the number one thing was probably making the U14 national team that summer between 7th and 8th grade, and kind of helped me realize, if you're going to do this in any sport, your best chance is soccer. And, thankfully I love the sport, love competing. And so it wasn't like, I loved any of the other ones more than the other, but soccer definitely just became, my favorite sport because I was probably excelling at that one the most. And that was a big transition for me, was giving up the other sports, going all in on soccer at about, 13, 14 years old.
What advice would you give to parents? And you're a dad, but your baby's very young, but
he's not on the field yet.
Yeah, but someday you'll have to go through this. But what advice would you give to parents who are listening? We have a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, parents of kids who are wanting to pursue sports. And sometimes we can be a little biased as parents to think our kid is maybe better than they are. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm just saying sometimes we're a little blinded by our own children's, talent level, I guess. But that's one thing to be pretty good. It's another thing to be like on the national team. What advice would you give to those parents as they navigate, especially followers of Christ, right? As they navigate, trying to let their kids experience and be all in? Because if you're really that good, like you were, I have to imagine travel, practice, there's a lot of your time taken away.
For sure. And I think there's a lot of honesty that needs to be had from the lens of a parent. And you always, yes, you want to believe that your kid can accomplish anything, but there has to be a realistic expectation of like, okay, is the ceiling for my kid high school? Is it high school sports? Is it college? And is it like, do I think they have a chance at being a professional athlete? And, you'll get feedback along the way. So it's not just your eyes looking from coaches and, other players, parents, like, wow, your kid's really excelling. And so you have to be honest and take a step back and try and not have the bias, which is probably impossible, as I'll figure out later on in my life. But I think when you do that and you say, okay, if their ceiling is high school, then, and you can recognize that probably, fairly early, like middle school, elementary school, then you can have them just make sure they love what they're doing, and they can probably dabble a lot more in some other sports. It's very social and it's so fun. I mean, I remember playing high school soccer and the level was not amazing, but I had so much fun playing with friends that I didn't get to play with at the highly competitive club level. And so, being able to play other sports, if it's college, then making sure, one, that your kid loves it, like not forcing them to do something just because they're good at it, but making sure that that's something that they want to do. Because if they don't have the drive or the passion and the love of the game, then you're setting your kid up for just, mentally struggling with having to, whether it's please their parents or feeling the pressure of having to get a scholarship just because they're good at something. And so I think making sure that they love it. And then if you're really lucky and your kid is super talented, has a ceiling of being a professional, loves the sport and kind of ticks all the boxes, then it's walking alongside of them and being a part of their journey and pushing them along, saying, hey, like, I know that this is what you want. So if you want this, like, here are some extra trainings that you can do. Here are some extra coaching, I don't know, clinics that I saw on the internet. Do you want me to sign you up? Like being proactive about, encouraging them along the way. But I think it does all go back to being brutally honest about their ceiling and what they want from their experience. Is it social? Is it competitive? Is it ultra competitive? I think that'll kind of help steer their decision.
Yeah, there's a lot of levels to that. And I think we miss that in thinking that our kids are the future, professional athlete when they might just be a good high school player. And that's okay to just go that route. Walker Zimmerman, he's our guest here today on Sports Spectrum. I read a great story about you and your coach. I think it was around this time, maybe when you're 13, 14, your coach was being a little harsh with your team and you prayed. I'm not sure if you prayed with him or for him. I just saw that you prayed and I was like, well, you got to tell this story, Walker, because it's a lot better told from you than from me.
Well, it's so funny because that resurfaced. I think he said that in an interview with someone recently. And I was like, man, when was that? Like, it didn't occur to me of like, when was that specific time?
Yeah.
And so it's very vague, but I do think I remember it was just, he just seemed so off. I mean, normally, Nuno is one of my favorite coaches of all time. It was very instrumental in not only me as a person, or as a player, but also as a person. And we were just, a normal week of training and a normal training day. And he was just off, being very mean and aggressive, just kind of like distant from the group, which was very, very unlike him. And so I think I went up and was like, hey, like, is everything okay? Like, what's going on? Like, it's not, your attitude's kind of not being as genuine as it normally is. And then I think I just asked him if I could pray for him. And, I wish I could remember in vivid detail everything that was going on or what that looked like. But it was cool to hear him come out and tell that story and kind of refresh my mind of, wow, that was a really cool moment. And I'm glad that it's, stuck with him and could have affected him and his walk with Christ. So
how old are you at that point? Do you, I guess the age range?
I'm probably, if I had to guess, probably a 9th or 10th grader. So 14,
15.
15 is probably about when that happened.
That's pretty bold for a teenage boy, if you will, or a young man to be able to pray like that. Is that around the time, Walker, when you're realizing and experiencing this faith as one that's your own and not kind of your parents?
100%. And I think I can kind of pinpoint it to 9th grade just because that was a year where I ended up starting a house church for kids at my high school, where we would go over to one of the students' houses in the basement and just have a time of all student-led stuff. So a little bit of worship, a little bit of a talk, and then a little bit of just prayer request community and just like hanging out. And so that was a time where I think it really developed into being my own, and really grew a lot in that year alone. And it was just a really cool moment. I know a lot of friends. It was just a chance where you could be bold and put in uncomfortable situations as students who, it is awkward kind of talking about, your beliefs and singing. I remember the feeling of like singing when you're like in middle school, high school and worshiping. It's just like a little awkward. And it's just gave everyone a chance to kind of like dig into that a little bit. And I think push into uncomfortable situations. And that's just going to help you grow. And so that was a really cool year and time for, I think, a lot of my friends.
You started a house church in 9th grade. Now I know you're a pastor's kid, but that's quite bold. Like, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I'm watching teenagers. My daughter is a senior this year, so she's a lot different as a senior than she was as a 9th grader. But as a 9th grader, it was one of those deals where you're just trying to like fit in. And even though you love Jesus, she was baptized, I think, when she was 11 or 12, like, it's still awkward. So that's quite the bold thing to have, Walker.
It is. I think a lot of that I can attribute to, my older brothers. So they were juniors at the time. And so they had started a house church, or like we're part of a house church. So I got to see all of them and their friends kind of do it. And that was a huge catalyst for me to kind of have the boldness, have the conversations with other people to kind of get that thing rolling. So huge credit to them. And I mean, they still play such an important role in my life, and they certainly helped me with that.
What's it been like navigating Jesus and soccer as you became a pro and started becoming, pretty good at what you do? And sports can kind of dominate in the professional athlete's life. We've had many pro athletes. I know a lot of them personally, and sports can become a real a blessing, but there's also the curse of that. And if you let it, sports can take away from your journey with Christ. What has that been like, kind of navigating both of those worlds for you and placing the two things in their proper order?
Yeah, it's been certainly tons of ups and downs. Probably, I think back to my time in Dallas where I was alone, 19 years old, moving to a new city, away from everyone and everything. Like I knew no one in Dallas. Moving there as a 19-year-old for my first year, and had a ton of injuries year 1 and 2. And I think what has helped me so much in my entire career is finding community outside of the soccer team or club very early, and having like not to say that like I'm not being friends with my teammates, but having another outlet of whether it's church community, neighborhood community, of finding people just to like step away from their sport, because it can become all consuming. You're with those guys every single day. You travel with them all of the time. You're in group chats constantly. And so having the chance to Dallas specifically, I randomly met a neighbor at my apartment complex at the grill one night. I think I had my siblings in town and their girlfriends, and was cooking out for them at the apartment grill. Met a neighbor who happened to be a youth pastor over at a church. And I had tried a few churches out, but anyways, he invited me. We ended up becoming really good friends, future roommates. I immediately stepped in and volunteered with their high school ministry, did some guest speaking, teaching, and had a group of kids that I took over at 7th grade, a little small group, and led them all the way for my 5 years. So I left when they were a senior in high school. I got traded. So it was cool to kind of be with them kind of for their whole 7th to 12th grade journey. But that was really important to me, is just finding community outside of soccer, because it can be so time consuming for your brain just to constantly be thinking about it, around it all the time. And so having another outlet, most of the time for me, it's the church and community group side of things that I think really helps bring a balance to that whole aspect.
So you go from Dallas to Los Angeles, and then right before the pandemic, you arrive in Nashville. Tell me about being in Nashville and what this experience has been like for you these past few years, especially in the midst of, a pandemic.
It's funny, the day that we closed on our house was the day that everything shut down in Nashville. So everyone's talking about getting their toilet paper, getting their frozen food. I'm like, listen, I literally don't have toilet paper at my house. I don't have any food at my house. Like, we're moving. We got the keys today and everything shut down. So we ended up going to the store like the day before everything like closed down, because we had gotten wind that it might, and talked to the builder. I'm like, can we please just like, stock up a little bit at the house? He's like, yeah, no problem. So we didn't have the keys yet, but we illegally, halfway moved in some food and toilet paper just in case everything went away. So that was our experience. It was a whirlwind. I got traded on a Monday. We were under contract on that house on Saturday. So it was a very quick process. And Nashville's been amazing. I think the fact that we have loved it so much, despite all of the hardships with the pandemic, having trouble, really meeting a ton of people, getting out as much as we would like to. And that first year, more so, we love Nashville, and it really does feel like home. It came at the perfect time for our family and where we are at this stage of life, being able to have a house, get a dog, have a baby, and really enter into this kind of full adulthood mode, parent mode. It's been the perfect city to relocate, and it really came at the perfect time.
So take me through this process, right? You're 19 when you come into the MLS, and now you're 28. I'm doing my math here, right? You're 28. So what's this been like for you, the growth process as a professional soccer player, not just as a man and as a dad? Certainly, that transformation that you've kind of described, going from the young kid to being a husband and a dad. Now that's obvious, right? The way you're growing, but How about as a soccer player and what you didn't know when
Yeah.
you first came in versus where you are now?
Yeah, I think, for me specifically, the first 2, 3 seasons were really tough. I mentioned being on my own, being away from home, being long distance and relationship, and really just having to find myself. But on the soccer field, the way that translated, I had a lot of injuries. I think a lot of it was um, whether it was nutritional habits, stress, learning how to take care of my body, handle the load of a full professional season. I had a lot of injuries my first 2 seasons. And for me as a player, I knew, or I felt like I knew at the time, that I could do it, that I was able to be a dominant force in this league. And that was the frustrating part, was knowing that I felt like I had the talent, but couldn't get my body healthy, couldn't get opportunity. And that was really frustrating. And so I really felt like I made my first big leap, 2016, which was my first year as like a full-time starter. So that would have been my 4th year in the league, which obviously was longer than I would have had originally planned, but there's a time and place for everything. And 2016 was a big year for me. First year as a starter, we won the Supporters Shield with Dallas. We won the Open Cup in Dallas, so we won 2 of the 3. And those are the first trophies that the club had in 20 years. And that really kind of set a goal in my mind of, okay, every club that I go to, I want to win a trophy. I want to bring back a trophy to every club so that like my mark, my stamp is on that franchise, that club. And so then I go to LAFC and I took another huge leap in my development. So had that 2016 season, 2017 get called into my first camp with the national team under Bruce Arena. Get my first cap that January. End up getting hurt in the middle of 2017, and that kind of set the stage of a likely trade from Dallas. I've been there for 5 years. I think I was ready for something different. And that's when LAFC happened. And that was the next big step in my career, was playing under Bob Bradley, amazing coach. LAFC did everything the right way in terms of the expansion and creating a culture that was going to be competitive from the start. And so sure enough, 2019, we got our trophy there at LAFC, Supporters Shield, and really felt like I was taking strides in my game to not just me believing that I, was the player that I was, but really starting to get some recognition for those kind of performances. So 2016 was, finished 4th in Defender of the Year, 2019 up to 2nd for Defender of the Year. And that was my first MLS Best 11, first All-Star appearance. And so, like I said, starting to get a little bit of more recognition. And, ever since entering the league, one of my goals was Defender of the Year, All-Star, Best 11, checking all of those individual accolades off.
Sure.
While also bringing trophies. And so there I was and thought everything was going well. And then boom, the trade happened. Go to Nashville. Pandemic happens, and probably enter into the hardest training phase that I've ever put myself through, when no one, when there's no accountability and you just got to hold yourself accountable, and really pushed it. And I think that's what makes winning, Defender of the Year 2020 that much more special for me, is knowing how much work went in behind the scenes. And especially even, with a new expansion team, the difficulties that everyone faced around the league for sure. But our team in particular, with the MLS's back tournament and being a new team, having no fans really in your first season, all those things are difficult things to deal with. And so it was an incredible year for me. Check that off the bucket list. And now here we are in 2021, second year, surging, trying to make some moves in the table, and again chasing that first trophy for the club. So that's kind of where I am, the summary. But I felt a tremendous amount of growth as a player, and certainly really happy with where I am, mentally, physically, in terms of competing day in and day out, and trying to make others around me better.
It's nice to have fans back too, isn't it?
Oh, it is night and day difference.
It's so good to have fans back. And that's all sports. I don't care what sport it is. Just having fans in the stands just makes a huge difference with the experience. I have to imagine as an athlete, it makes a huge difference as well.
100%. I mean, and also, I mean, when you look at our fans, it's just been a steady growth. You look around the stadium and it's like okay, like obviously the first game is what it is, and that was different, amazing, special. But now it's just, I think as we're getting more successful, you see more and more people rolling into the stadium, more and more people getting really excited about the new stadium coming in next year, and I think that's going to be a big turning point, where we won't ever look back after the stadium opens hopefully next May.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about putting on that USA uniform and representing our country as a member of the United States national team. What is that like? That has to be such a cool thing to kind of come together and represent your country on the biggest stage.
That's certainly always been the goal. It's always been the dream. And really, when you take a step back, realizing that you're living out your dream is something that's really special. And that's when I think you start to feel really proud about all the hard work that you put in and all the sacrifices that you made along the way. And that kind of goes back to the very beginning of our conversation when you talk about, whether they're high school, college, professional. I mean, the higher level you go, the more sacrifices you're probably making. And so for me, being a part of the national team, dream come true, makes all those sacrifices worth it. And really, I've created some of my best friendships on the national team with those guys. And we're all really excited to be a part of this qualifying process and get us back into a World Cup. And that's the ultimate goal for me and my career, is making a World Cup roster and playing a role in us doing well at a World Cup. So that's what we're chasing. And certainly probably the best feeling in the world is representing your country on the highest stage.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be rooting for you and cheering you on. My last question for you, Walker, is a question we ask a lot of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. What is the Lord teaching you or showing you right now? What's he been kind of impressing on your heart, knowing that we learn something new every day from God? What's he been showing you and teaching you right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the fatherhood aspect, honestly. I mean, that's the freshest thing in my life. So I think with Tucker, I think a big thing in my life, big theme that's kind of recurring is, in a way that I kind of want to act, is, what do I wish people would have done for me? And so I think when I took over that small group in Dallas, it was, okay, when I was in 7th grade, what did I wish that my small group leaders would have asked me? What did I wish that they would have done with me? And so really just trying to view it through that lens. And so with Tucker, I think I have a great role model with my dad, and trying to emulate everything I love, that the way he parented. And now I get to watch my oldest brother also, who has a kid who's my niece, who's about a little over a year old, watching him and how he's changed and parented. And so really it's about, finding the patience and learning about how sacrificial God's love is for us through my love for my son. It really kind of changes the picture for me, and helps you realize actually what a great sacrifice Jesus was on the cross when you think about God giving his only son for us. So that's probably the main thing, is just kind of connecting God's love for us by every time spending time with Tucker. So it's probably the biggest thing right now.
Well, Walker, I think the biggest champion of this entire conversation is Tucker. I mean, once you picked him up, he was crushing it, right? I haven't heard a peep out of him in the last 20 minutes.
He's passed out here in the arms. He's getting the old the rockabye baby treatment. So he's doing well.
Good job, Dad. Yeah, good job. Appreciate you, Walker. Thanks for being here, my friend. We'll hopefully get you back on the show again sometime soon. But all the best to you, continued success, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That's great stuff there from Walker Zimmerman from Nashville SC, the 2020 MLS Defender of the Year. And the season's winding down right now, and Nashville's right up there in the Eastern Conference. And we'll have to see if Walker can get that trophy that he got when he was in Dallas and when he was in Los Angeles, and bring that trophy to the great city of Nashville. We appreciate Walker for being here today on Sports Spectrum. We also appreciate you for listening and checking us out. Make sure you go to our website, sportspectrum.com, for all of our content. It's free. Devotionals, articles, stories, podcasts, all available right there at our website. And the archival content goes back years, 20, 30 years. Like I said, it's all free and available at sportspectrum.com. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you leave a review on this podcast on the Apple Podcast app. Make sure you tell someone about Sports Spectrum and look at us as a resource to be able to share the gospel with someone who loves sports. And then tune in next time right here on the show. We love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.